Introduce, I think that the proper way to introduce a guest for me of this magnitude is someone who really has, been kind of my professor, my internet professor, which he doesn't know, but I've been listening to him for a while and a lot of his internet stuff. But Dr. Phil Fernandes, one of the things that I love about him, he's the pastor of Trinity Bible Fellowship. He wears many hats here, so I'm going to try to go through this. He's also the president of the Institute of Biblical Defense. He also teaches Bible and philosophy at King West School and Imago Dei Institute. He holds a PhD in philosophy of religion and has publicly debated some of America's leading atheists. And you can easily go on YouTube and find some of those debates, and they are absolutely fantastic. He has authored several books, and I'd like to mention just a few of them that I have that I like. One of them is No Other Gods, a defense of biblical Christianity, God, Government, and the Road to Tyranny, and The God Who Sits Enthroned, Evidence for God's Existence. He has also authored these two books that I really like. This one is called Contend Earnestly for the Faith, A Survey of Christian Apologetics. This is a must-have for anyone getting started in apologetics. And then he has this one, The Atheist Delusion. This is really a grace by Dr. Fernandes. He is basically offering this as a $5 donation if you have it. If not, just go ahead. They're in the back, and just go ahead and pick them up. Okay, and that's just something he has bring here to bless us with, and it's called Atheist Delusion. Really, really good book. So I'm really, really privileged to introduce this morning's speaker, Dr. Phil Fernandes.
Okay, I want to talk today about my cumulative case for God, and I started using, I think I developed it about 1995, and I started actually using the cumulative case when I debated Dr. Michael Martin from Boston University. At that time, he was the country's leading philosophical atheist, and what I realized was in my earlier debates, I was arguing for God's existence beyond all reasonable doubt, as if I was a lawyer in a criminal court. And that's fine. Does that work now?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay, good. No problem. And you can do that. William Lane Craig still does that. Okay? And William Lane Craig is smart enough to do that. But then I realized all my opponents have to do is raise 3 or 4% doubt, and they might have reason. It might cause reasonable doubt. And so I thought, why should a Christian thinker put himself in a situation where he can prove his case with like 90 to 95% probability and then still lose the debate? So I thought I was actually setting the bar too high. And I thought, I'm not William Lane Craig. I'm not as smart as that guy. Great guy, by the way. He's a real loving guy. He doesn't look like it in his debates because he's always slaughtering somebody. But whatever the case, so I decided, well, look, let's just make it theism versus atheism, and which is more reasonable, which is more plausible. And so what I'm doing here is I'm taking my argument out of the criminal courts where you must prove your case beyond reasonable doubt. Don't forget, the O.J. Simpson trial, I don't know about you, but personally looked like, man, this guy's guilty. Well, when the jurors found him innocent, I thought, man, are these people crazy? And then they interviewed one of the jurors, and he's a very articulate guy, and he said, oh no, I think he did it. Most of the jurors think he did it. They said, well, why did you acquit him? And he said, because it was our job. Our order said if there's reasonable doubt, you don't convict. And this guy hired 4 or 5 of the world's greatest attorneys, paid them millions of dollars, and each one's job was to raise a little bit of reasonable doubt. And you added all that together, and we could not, in good consciousness, convict him. And so I thought, gee, that's what the advantage I'm giving my atheist colleagues. Now the good thing is, my early debates, the atheists just laid down and died for me. But I thought one of these days I'm going to get an atheist that knows what he's talking about, and I'm going to need to level the playing field. So I'm moving it into the civil courts, where you must prove your case based on the preponderance of the evidence. In other words, if I prove with 51% probability that God exists, and the atheist proves like 49%, I still win that debate. And so, atheists claim, well, I don't have a worldview, I just lack belief in God. That's baloney. You're taking a debate. You're taking a debate, you really believe something with passion, okay? And so it's your, mano y mano, one-on-one, your worldview, atheism versus our worldview, theism, and we'll see which is more reasonable. And so I use the preponderance of evidence there. I treat, for purposes of the debate, Christian theism, just for purposes of argumentation, as a hypothesis. Kind of an explanation of the data of human experience. Okay? This helps in a lot of ways. By the way, it simplifies stuff so people don't have to think, well, I can't follow all the steps in your cosmological argument. You don't have to. Because all I'm asking you is to look at the fact that both atheists and theists agree the universe had a beginning. Now, which is more reasonable? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, or in the beginning, nothing created the heavens and the earth? Atheists used to argue before Big Bang cosmology, before the 1920s and Edwin Hubble, they used to argue that the universe doesn't need a cause because it always existed. Now they argue the universe doesn't need a cause even though it had a beginning. It's just there. Well, that's a good explanation. You walk into a room, there's a guy laying down in a puddle of blood with a knife in his back, and you say, oh no, this guy was murdered. And so he says, no, I think that knife is just there. I don't know, it doesn't give me warm fuzzies. So, whatever the case, so I argue that it's more reasonable to believe in God than it is to be an atheist, and that theism offers a more adequate explanation than atheism does for several common aspects of human experience. This is the cumulative aspect here, okay? Where, people might say, well, I don't really believe that's strong evidence for God, but I believe that, it is more reasonable. Moral laws, it's more reasonable that there's a moral lawgiver than that there isn't. That we just evolved our ideas of morality from primordial soup, and we're just mere molecules of motion, and somehow morality just popped into the picture. And so, basically, with each of these arguments, the evidence, each one of these arguments, each one of these common aspects of human experience, the evidence starts compounding and accumulates and builds my case. Recently, an atheist on a blog accused, there were two guys arguing, an atheist and a Christian arguing about me, and so he was trying to make me look like an idiot and stuff, and he claimed that I stole my cumulative case from William Lane Craig, because Craig is starting to use the terms. Technically, though, last I heard, his cumulative case isn't really a cumulative case. All he's saying is, I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. I've got several arguments. My cumulative case really is a cumulative case, to where I'm looking at these different aspects, and I really don't use I'll use arguments, but not really like an argument. I'll just use it as, well, this is kind of a clue. And is it a clue that favors atheism or that favors theism? Then the same guy said that I probably just read Dinesh D'Souza's book, and I got got all my stuff from him, and that's really crazy because I've been debating atheists since 1990, and Dinesh D'Souza didn't write his book on refuting the new atheist until 2007. So he was more of just a political guy until about 2007, 2008. So, but whatever the case, this is my cumulative case for God. There's been some mention of it in scholarly journals when I debated Michael Martin, and it was mostly just because Michael Martin got a lot of attention by Christian thinkers, and so I've been doing it for a while. Well, the first aspect of human experience is the beginning of the universe. okay, the beginning of the universe, we live in a day and age where no longer is there a debate about the beginning of the universe. Now, I do believe behind closed doors, atheists are saying, look, the universe had a beginning, but it still doesn't need a cause. But behind closed doors, believe me, they probably admit, we have got to find some loophole in our Big Bang cosmology or something. We can't live, we can't live with a universe that had a beginning without a cause. It does not look good for us. So I think they're going sci-fi now with, string theory, and they're taking quantum physics, and because we don't know what's going on there, they're trying to apply that on the level above the subatomic particle level. But whatever the case, everybody agrees that the universe had a beginning. The second law of thermodynamics, we've known this since the 1870s. And the first law says that the amount of energy in the universe remains constant. There is no new energy being created, and no energy is being destroyed. The amount remains the same. But as we move forward in time, energy changes forms, and as it changes forms, it becomes less usable to us. Okay? So if you completely use a log and burn the log for heat, eventually you have ashes. And you've used all the energy available there, and but the energy in the universe is winding down. So eventually we're going to reach a stage where, unless there's intervention from the outside, which the atheists can't have because there is no outside, unless there's intervention from the outside, all the available energy in the universe will have been used up. That will mark the death of the universe. But that means if you go backwards in time, you have to reach a point where all the energy in the universe is in a usable state. And that would mark the beginning of the universe. So based on that alone, even before Big Bang cosmology, we should have acknowledged the beginning of the universe. Now, I'm not a Big Bang proponent, but almost every atheist I've ever debated is. Okay? Probably most Christian philosophers are. Most Christian philosophers are old Earth creationists. I'm a young Earth creationist. I think there's some assumptions in Big Bang cosmology and some problems with it. It's on the scientific level. But for purpose of argumentation, the Big Bang model is some form of it, and there's lots of different forms of it, but some form of it is the reigning model in cosmology today. And the Big Bang model says that as we move forward in time, the universe is expanding in all different directions, so that if we were to move backwards in time, the universe would get more and more dense until they say it would reach a point of infinite density, or a point that takes up no dimensions in space. Okay? Now why do they say that? Why do they use words like that? Well, they use words like that because they don't want to say that there was a time when the universe didn't exist and then it popped into existence out of nothing. That sounds too much like Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. A point of infinite density is a point that's dense or compact or small without limit. Well, a thing can only be small or dense to a finite degree. If it's infinitely dense, it's not there. When you're talking about the physical universe, if you reduce it to a point that takes up no dimensions in space, then that means it takes up no space. And again, it's not there. Okay? So they don't want to say that the Big Bang shows that there was a time when the universe was not, and then boom, it exploded into existence if the Big Bang model is true. Robert Jastrow, who's an agnostic, he's skeptical about God's existence, but he admits, the head of the Goddard Institute of Space Studies at NASA, he admits that the Big Bang model supports theism. So he closes his book, God and the Astronomers, with a final paragraph that scientists have climbed the mountains of ignorance, basically, I would call it the mountains of knowledge, what they're saying, they're learning more as they go up. When they reach the top, they pull themselves up, and then he said they found a band of theologians waiting there for centuries. The only problem I have is we haven't been there for centuries, guys. We've been there for millennia. I mean, you're talking about Abraham, Moses. I mean, this even predates what we call Christianity. So whatever the case, you could also use philosophical arguments to show that time had to have a beginning. Okay? This goes into Zeno's paradoxes and a lot of different things there, but basically, if the universe is eternal, okay, then there has to be an infinite number of moments in the past. Okay? But if there was an infinite number of moments in the past, you would never reach the present moment now. Because no matter how many moments you traverse, there'd still be an infinite number more of moments to go. But we have reached the present moment now, so there had to be a first moment in time. So in other words, time had a beginning. By the way, Big Bang cosmology teaches that space, time, and energy all had a beginning in the Big Bang. And so basically, if time had to have a beginning, the universe had to have a beginning. There had to be that first moment. See, but I'm using temporal language because I'm stuck to it. I'm a temporal being. So basically, so just bear with me on it. But before, there really was no before time. But before creation, there was no time. God existed in the eternal now, one timeless moment, and then God created time. So time began when God created the first changing being, the first changing thing. I think if God only created angels, didn't create anything physical, there would still be time, because they could tell you their birthday. They could tell you the exact moment they were created. And they could start keeping track. So whatever the case, from nothing, nothing comes. So what is more reasonable? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, or in the beginning, nothing produced the heavens and the earth? You know, I tell people, I'm so happy that I'm a philosopher, because scientists have to talk about something. Well, they're supposed to. There's a lot of scientists who are talking about nothing now and getting paid, but they're really supposed to be talking about something, at least, you know, drawing observations or something about something physical in the world. Philosophers can get away with, you know, they actually get paid for talking about nothing. So I can talk, you know, hours upon hours about nothing, and I'm still earning my pay. And, but let me tell you, it's a little bit about nothing, okay? And believe me, if you're a philosopher, you know a lot about nothing. We pride ourselves in knowing a lot about nothing. But nothing is nothing. Now, at this point, you're thinking, this guy's profound. I didn't know that. Nothing is nothing. But I'll tell you, so our world's leading thinkers, if they reject God, they don't have that clear, that nothing is nothing. They're always talking about nothing being, you know, some kind of positive energy and negative energy. It's like, dude, if it's nothing, you don't have any kind of energy. So what are you doing, you know? But nothing is nothing. Therefore, nothing can do nothing. Therefore, nothing can cause nothing. Everything that has a beginning needs a cause, because non-being cannot cause being. So something had to cause the universe to come into existence. By the way, if all of nature needs a cause, then by definition the cause must transcend nature. The cause must be a supernatural cause. And I remember we have Japanese exchange students that sometimes come to the school that we go to, and their English is really bad, and they're there just to spend a semester with us to see how they like it. So their grades, we grade them, but it doesn't even count. It's a special program that they're in. But they were all coming from a Buddhist school, so they don't believe in God. And so I would sit down with them. I have the rest of my English-speaking students working on assignment, and I have to really break things down small. I thought, how can I argue for God's existence and use small words? And so I was sitting down by the window of my classroom, and I also teach fitness, one fitness class a day, so the weight room, you can see it from my classroom. I was telling them, I said, I believe God made everything. And they're like, oh, yeah, like that. And I said, what about you? And then they talked together, and then their translator said, Big Bang. And I said, well, where did the Big Bang come from? And then they talked with each other, and then he said, miracle. And I said, no, I can have miracles, because I believe in a miracle-working God. You can't have miracles. Nothing can't make miracles. And so they kept arguing that everything came from nothing without a cause. So then I finally said, look, I have the power to lift weights. And I pointed to the weight room, and they were, oh. And I said, I don't have the power to make everything. And they agreed. you know? And I said, nothing doesn't have the power to lift weights, and they laughed. And then I said, so how could nothing have the power to make everything? And then they got quiet and they didn't want to talk anymore. So you don't have to use big words. You can still make this case. So that's one aspect, the beginning of the universe. The next one, the continuing existence of the universe. All existence cannot have the possibility of non-existence, for then nothing would. This is one of Aquinas' arguments. This takes a long time to explain, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Sometimes in my opening statements in my debates, I don't even bring it up. Okay, but I'll just run through it real quick. All existence cannot have the possibility of non-existence, for then nothing would have existed in the past. For from nothing, nothing comes. So something must be eternal and have no possibility of non-existence, a necessary being. Here's the real precise way of arguing this out. Let's say this represents everything that exists, okay? If everything that exists has the possibility of non-existence, then given enough time, every possibility for non-existence will have been actualized. I mean, if there's no, I'm going to stop existing as far as the atheist knows, if oxygen goes out of existence. So if all these other dependent things go out of, contingent things go out of existence, then I'm going to cease to exist. Well, there's a scenario that will, every possibility will eventually be actualized. So we'll reach a point where every possibility for non-existence will have obtained. However, if we go backwards in time far enough, we'll reach that same scenario where every possibility for non-existence will have obtained and nothing will exist. But from nothing, nothing comes. Non-being cannot cause being, so then nothing would now exist. Okay? And so the only way to support possible existence is, so you have possible existence here, that has the possibility of not existing, and then here you have to have necessary existence, grounds all the continuing existence of possible existence. That's the only way that beings that are contingent, that could possibly not exist, the only way to ground all finite, limited, dependent, contingent existence is the existence of a totally independent, necessary being, a being that cannot not exist, a being that has no possibility of not existing, a being that is existence in itself. See, we have existence because God gave us existence. God is pure, infinite existence. That's why he could say from the burning bush to Moses, I am who I am. Mm-hmm. Phil Fernandes, I could say I am because you want to hear a boring lecture, man. I have to tell you about how my mom and dad got together and met, and eventually got married, had a baby boy named him Phil, and there happens to be enough food for me to eat. Originally, I was only drinking milk. I couldn't handle food when I was a little baby, and all. There's oxygen, and there's this, and there's a lot. I am because, and you could write 1,000 pages, and you're just skimming the surface. God says, I am who I am. That's it. I'm it. I'm the real thing. And so now you can, an easier way to explain it, but it takes some of the force away from the argument, is just to say, if everything that exists is a dependent thing, it depends on something else for its continued existence, then if you add up all the dependent beings, you would have one big dependent being. You would still need a totally independent being that exists in its own power to ground the existence of all the dependent beings. Now, when you bring that up, they're going to try to claim that you're using the fallacy of composition, that sometimes the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But that's only when you deal with emergent properties. In other words, you get a trunk, you get a tail, you get big legs, you get a big body, you get a big head, and then eventually emerges, oh wow, it's an elephant, okay? But this is more like if every square inch of this carpet is brown, adding them together will not give you a red carpet. And so if every square inch of the universe is dependent, you add all these dependent things together, you don't get a totally independent thing, a totally non-contingent, necessary thing. Now some atheists might say, well maybe there's the invisible universe, some aspect of the universe we can't see. That's totally independent, that's eternal, that's non-contingent, that's necessary. I said, okay, good, now you agree that God exists, now let's talk about what attributes he has, and if it's a personal God or not. So if they want to go that route, I'm more than willing to comply. Okay, the design and order found in the universe. Well, you can look small, you can look big. If you're open to God, you're going to find him. Okay? You can look small. A single-celled animal contains enough genetic information to fill 20,000 volumes of encyclopedia. Richard Dawkins admits that. Richard Dawkins admits that in his, I believe it's The Blind Watchmaker work. Okay? Now, you can't get 20,000 volumes of encyclopedia by chance. In fact, even if you had all the material to make a dictionary or one volume encyclopedia in a print shop, you can't have a random explosion and then accidentally produce one volume of encyclopedia. Explosions do not cause more order and complexity. Like the Oklahoma City bombing, okay, you see chaos. Okay, every time we scientifically examine the effects of an explosion, we see things go from a state of order to a state of disorder. If you have a television set and you get 20 stations, 20 channels, you blow it up, you're not going to get a 21st or 22nd station. And by the way, I think that's one of the reasons why evolutionists are moving away from Big Bang as an explosion. They're just talking about inflation, how it's expanding, but we don't like to compare it to an explosion anymore. Well, I think that's a good move, because explosions, if the Big Bang is, if you view it as an explosion, it doesn't cause more order and more complexity and continue to, if atheism is true, it's continuing to produce more order and complexity as we move forward in time. That's baloney. Explosions don't do that. So they're kind of moving away from it. Hoyle and McGrath, two of Great Britain's leading evolutionary scientists, okay, they were evolutionists, and they tried to study what's the chance of life evolving from non-life without intelligent intervention. So that's what they believed. And they found out it was about the same as the chance of a random tornado running through a junkyard and accidentally producing a fully functional Boeing 747. Okay? In other words, what they're saying is it couldn't happen. Now, I wish that means, Hoyle and McGrath became Baptist, joined the local Baptist church. No, now they entertain panspermia. That therefore intelligent life from other planets must have seeded. By the way, Richard Dawkins, in the movie Expelled, Ben Stein forced him into a corner, and he said, well, maybe aliens did it. So I argued as far back as 1987 that secular America, atheistic America, was moving the intellectuals, they were going New Age. And that science was turning into sorcery and things of that sort. Because if you want to flee from God, Paul says, Romans 1, you don't become atheist. Atheism is a halfway house. Man does not live on bread alone. Atheism says bread is all you got. We're just physical beings. There's just physical needs. And so Paul says if you reject the true God, you suppress the truth of the true God who has revealed himself to us in nature and in our conscience, Romans 2:14 and 15, then you're going to bow down before statues of four-legged creatures. So all atheism is a halfway house. It only reared its ugly head twice in the history of philosophy, and it gets slammed within a generation or two. And you either go back to biblical theism, Christian theism, or you go into paganism. So atheism is just a halfway house between Christianity and paganism. Let me see, there's a couple other things I want to say about design and order in the universe. Types of intelligent design. William Dembski is real good at dealing with specified complexity. That's the highly complex information we find in a single-celled animal. And Dembski shows that it's impossible to get this level. I mean, let's say I told Eric, I said, Eric, man, I didn't get up in time for breakfast this morning. I can't speak without having breakfast. Eric says, no problem. Phil's got a servant's heart. I'll have Phil run to the store and get you a box of alphabet cereal and milk. So I eat alphabet cereal and milk in here before we get started. Then I get behind him, starting to talk, and Greg's sitting down looking, and he sees my bowl of cereal and a little bit of milk there, and then he sees Raiders rule, Seahawks stink. And he gets mad. He says, man, you can't be dissing on a local team and stuff like that. I said, I'm not. I just had cereal there. I accidentally spilled something. I'm not perfect. And I guess it just accidentally spelled out Raiders rule, Seahawks stink. Is he going to believe that? No. Guess what? Guess what? In that little statement, maybe root for the Raiders is not a good illustration of intelligence. Use your God-given imagination here. But there's enough specified complexity in that alone. Okay? I mean, if it just said A, B, 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 I mean, you'd have it'd be specified, but it wouldn't be complex enough. Okay? But when it spells out a message, even that short, we know that there was some type of intelligent design. Irreducible complexity, Michael Behe in Darwin's Black Box, he showed that when Darwin was around, we just thought on the submolecular level, we just thought that everything was simple on the, below the molecular level. So we look really complex, but I can explain how we evolved and stuff because we're just a bunch of simple molecules thrown together. But that was a black box. We didn't know what was inside the molecule back then. Now we do. And Michael Behe, a scientist who's a professor at Lehigh University, he said on the submolecular level, there are entities that are as complex as spaceships or computers, yet they're irreducibly complex. What that means is if you just take one part away, or one part, you know, just like one part of a spaceship or something like, and you just take that one part away, and then it totally ceases to function. Now, with spaceships and computers, sometimes they'll work without a part. But Behe's saying on the submolecular level, there are some of these things that you just take away one little tiny part, it ceases to work, it ceases to function, it would go out of existence, and it's not going to be able to evolve into something else. In other words, they had to be created that way, fully functional. Okay. Then there's the anthropic principle. Old Earth creationist Hugh Ross talks about this. It comes from the Greek word anthropos for man. Okay, and what scientists have realized is that the distance of the Earth from the sun was a little closer, we'd all fry. If the sun was a little bit further away, we'd all freeze to death. Even the revolution of the Earth around the sun has to be right. The shape of the sun, the shape of the Earth, the shape of our moon, the revolution of the moon around the Earth, with the controlling the tides and all. Jupiter just happens to be in the right place at the right time, and it's big enough to work. It's like a vacuum cleaner. Asteroids that would destroy the Earth probably, I don't know, every other day, and they're being destroyed when they hit Jupiter. So whatever the case in our own solar system, but then even you go to the far expanses of the universe, change the chemical composition 1 to 2%, and there'd be no human life on the planet Earth. So scientists said that our scientific investigation has revealed to us that the universe appears as if it was fine-tuned. Somebody stacked the deck, it was fine-tuned to support human life on the planet Earth. But then most of these scientists don't like that conclusion. It sounds too much like Genesis chapter 1. And so there's many different anthropic principles, which is not really good science. These are attempts to explain away what the scientific data is telling us. Okay? And they get into wild, wild speculation. By the way, you can add, is it Gonzalez's work? You can add to that also that the universe was not just fine-tuned to support human life on the planet Earth, but that the planet Earth, it appears that the planet, everything was fine-tuned so that the planet Earth would be the perfect place for scientific discovery. You couldn't even it's possible to have that God could have designed the planet where human life could thrive, but your scientific discovery would be very, very limited. The vantage point of the planet Earth is ideal for scientific discovery. So it seems, I mean, it's just like, you know, you're playing cards and you get dealt 4 aces. Only 4 cards and they're 4 aces. Or the other guy gets dealt that. And he just keeps winning, he just keeps getting 4 aces. After a while, the guy who's shuffling the deck, you know, you and him are probably going to throw down if you're listening to there's some intelligence involved in that. Possibility of human knowledge, human reason. So again, with the design in the universe, or the continuing existence of the universe, with the existence of the universe at all, due to the beginning of the universe, theism is more reasonable than atheism. The possibility of human knowledge, human reason. Could consciousness and our thinking ability really randomly evolve from matter? And your primordial soup and then single-celled animals somehow accidentally evolved into multi-celled animals and all this, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get a philosopher, French philosopher saying, "I think, therefore I am." Something happened from here to there. I mean, it just doesn't work. It's more reasonable to believe that we were created by a rational being and in the image of that rational being. Okay? Atheism cannot account for the validity of human reason. This is important, because what do atheists use to attack God? Human reason. See, the atheist is doing what Cornelius Mantil, the great presuppositional apologist, I'm not a presuppositionalist myself, but he makes a good point here. What the atheist is doing, the atheist in his worldview bank account doesn't have enough capital to build any trust in the validity of human reason. So he borrows that capital from the Christian worldview. So people will take things that are only consistent with the Christian worldview and use it with their worldview, which has no basis for them, and then try to use those things to attack Christianity. We see this in morality. Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, they go up Mount Sinai and borrow the 10 Commandments from Moses to then condemn God of injustice with some of his commands of the Old Testament. It's like, wait, you don't believe such thing as right and wrong, but you're convinced the Old Testament God is evil. And why? Because he breaks some of the commands of the Mosaic Law. You know, so maybe we don't always understand God's ways, but if you throw out God, you throw out morality too. But here's an example where they're borrowing capital from the Christian worldview. Let me tell you this, any worldview that cannot account for the validity of human reason is automatically an illogical worldview. Okay? So if I get an atheist student, young guy, and he tells me, I don't believe God exists and all this other stuff, and here's some of my arguments that I have. If I'm in a bad mood and I don't feel like arguing with the young kid, I just gotta say, I'll tell you what, let me give you an assignment to do. I use my reason, like you're using your reason right now. I use my reason, but I'm allowed to do that in my worldview because I believe a rational God created me in His image. So if man's created God's image, then it just makes sense that we're rational beings. But you have to give me a reason before I'll even dialogue with you on this. You have to give me the basis for the validity of human reason, some basis that gives you good reason to believe that reason works before I'll even dialogue with you on this topic. I don't always do that, but sometimes I do, and then you get a young man. And by the way, you can go surf the internet and you can find atheists arguing, trying to give an atheist explanation for how reason accidentally evolved, and it really does work. You know, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but Richard Taylor, Ronald Nash uses C.S. Lewis's argument that reason with a small, we have no reason to trust reason with a small r, human reason, unless it came from reason with a capital R. And Richard Taylor, a philosopher, uses that illustration of a lady. Let's say a lady's never been to Wales and she's riding a train into Wales. And she sees spelled out in white rocks, Wales there's no H in there, is there? No? Okay, we'll just go with that. I really don't care if you're from Wales and you're offended. Whatever. Okay, she's free to believe. She's never been to Wales, okay? So she's thinking, okay, I'm entering Wales. Okay? So she's free to believe. Now, this does not represent, we're not using an argument for intelligent design. This represents human reason in this illustration, our thinking ability. She's free to believe that these rocks, as dumb as it sounds, that these rocks rolled down randomly, okay, maybe during an earthquake or something, and accidentally spelled welcome to Wales. She's free to believe that. She's free to believe that human reason got here by chance. However, if human reason got here by chance, if these rocks accidentally fell and got there by chance, then she has no basis to believe what the message is telling her, because it's not really a message. Okay? She has no reason to believe she really is entering Wales. Okay? Atheists believe that our reason got here by non-rational causes. Our reason got here accidentally, and yet they're trusting what they think the reason is telling them. That really makes no sense whatsoever. Now, a lot of atheists will counter that, and they'll start talking about evolution having purposes, and designing this and designing that. Well, you just got to stop me after a while. So wait a minute. What you call evolution has all the attributes of my God. You say you don't believe in God, but you just deified evolution. Some evolutionists will capitalize evolution and start talking about it as if it's an intelligent designer. Okay, universal, eternal, unchanging truths like the laws of logic and mathematics. Most atheists, at least consistent atheists, are materialists. Only matter exists. So then what about thoughts and values and truth? When I debated Dan Barker at Bellevue Community College, during the cross-examination period, I said, how much does a thought weigh? And he said, and everybody started laughing at me like, oh, this dumb Christian thinks you can weigh thoughts. But I knew that Dan Barker is a consistent atheist. He's a materialist. He said, oh, you can weigh a thought. And then the crowd got real quiet. I said, so a thought, an idea, a choice is nothing but a chemical reaction that occurs inside our brains? And he said, yes. But this was before 9/11, so he kept bringing up Timothy McVeigh blowing up the Oklahoma City building as an example of evil. And obviously it is an example of evil. But he's an atheist. What is evil? Right? And so I said, well, why do you keep slamming Timothy McVeigh? He was just responding to a brain squirt. Timothy McVeigh had to do what he did. It was biologically determined. Okay? So, in other words, if only matter exists, and if we're going to deny things like non-material ideas, non-material choices, then man's not responsible for his actions. Whatever the case, if atheism is true, then there really is no such thing as truth. Because, how big is truth? How far can you throw it? What color is it? Can you bounce it? No. If atheism is true, consistent atheism, there is no such thing as truth, but then atheism can't be true. Now, St. Augustine was rather Platonic in his thought, got a lot of ideas from Plato, so he believed there's these eternal, unchanging ideas in our mind. But then he thinks that changing time-bound minds are corrected often by the eternal, unchanging truth. If you add 1 plus 2 and you get 5, the eternal unchanging truth that 1 plus 2 equals 3 stands in judgment on it. So he said, the source of these eternal unchanging truths cannot be time-bound, changing minds. Only an eternal, unchanging mind is an adequate explanation or source for eternal, unchanging truth. So he actually used this as an argument for God. Universal, eternal, unchanging moral laws. Even atheists make moral decisions and all, and moral judgments. I mean, atheists are always saying, there's no such thing as right and wrong. Therefore, you Christians are wrong to try to teach your morality in the public schools. No, if there's no such thing as right and wrong, Christians are never wrong. Leave us alone. Okay? There's no such thing as right and wrong, so I'm going to stand up for people's rights. And we're going to fight the mistreatment of animals or whatever. They live. Their actions speak louder than their words. So they might say, okay, well maybe, moral standards do exist, but they come from each individual. Well, the problem with that is then one individual, you or I, cannot condemn the actions of another individual like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, or Osama bin Laden as wrong. But even the atheists want to condemn their actions. So they might say, well, maybe it comes from society. Okay? But then one society cannot condemn the action. If the final arbiter in what is right and what is wrong is society, then one society like America cannot condemn the actions of another society like the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany or the Taliban as wrong. But even atheists want to condemn the actions of evil societies. So they might say, well, maybe it comes from world consensus. And I don't know about you, but nobody's given me a voting mechanism. So most of the time we don't know what the world consensus is. We just believe whatever CNN tells us. A recent CNN poll of, they don't tell you, recent CNN poll of inmates arrested for violent crimes, So they don't tell you who, I don't know who they're polling. But there have been world consensus, some things that everybody's pretty much in it. Like world consensus at one time used to be around the globe. And it was not a Christian consensus, but it was the world consensus. Slavery's part of life. And then the Christian world shut it down in ancient times, and then it reared its ugly head when a lot of guys from Arab lands, from Muslim countries, started taking the Islamic idea of conquest to the seas. We call them pirates, and then they started the modern slave trade. Okay, so world consensus has been wrong in the past. Slavery's all right. It's all right to own other human beings as your property. Well, they were wrong. They were wrong about women's rights. The woman is just property of the man. She has no rights. They were wrong. So even the moral relativist is going to admit that the world consensus was wrong in the past. Even atheists today try to build a better world. Even atheists, they condemn the past and try to build a better future. See, when they do that, they're appealing to a moral law that is above all individuals, all societies, because it judges them. It's above the world consensus. It even judges the world consensus as wrong. They're trying to build a better world. They're standing in judgment on the world consensus. And so not only do they condemn the world consensus, but they can. I had one atheist I debated, Jim Corbett. He said he was the president of Humanists of Washington back then. And he was talking about what a better world it would be. He said there's no such thing as good and evil. And I don't proselytize my faith, but the world's going to be so much of a better place when higher and higher percentages of people around the world, around the globe, embrace atheism. He's trying to build a better world. So even atheists condemn the past, they judge world consensus, and they try to build a better future. You know what they're doing? They're appealing to a moral standard above all individuals, above all societies, above any world consensus, and it's a moral standard that doesn't change with time. If there's a moral standard above all individuals, all societies, any world consensus, and it doesn't change with time, that implies the existence of a moral lawgiver above all individuals, all societies, and any world consensus. And the moral lawgiver is eternal and unchanging. So again, just what I said there, their actions appeal to a standard above all individuals, societies, and world consensus. Doesn't change with time. It implies a moral lawgiver above all individuals, all societies, and any world consensus. This moral lawgiver must be eternal and unchanging. Now, suppose somebody doesn't accept that conclusion. Say, well, I don't know, this and that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it makes the case for theism stronger than atheism. Boom. That's all I wanted. Our moral experience, it's more likely that God exists than that man is mere molecules in motion. Right? If, you tie this into human rights, I'm doing some overlapping here so that we can really rush through some of the later ones, but if you walk outside today and you see me kicking a mound of dirt, you're not going to run there and say, Eric, don't bring that guy back, he's an evil man. He was kicking a mound of dirt. Okay? But if you go outside and you see me kicking a little kid, after you get done punching me and calling 911, you're going to tell Eric, don't bring that guy back, he's a loser. If atheism is true, to be totally honest, if atheism is true, man is mere molecules in motion. A little child is really no different than a mound of dirt. I already believed in God and was a Christian when my grandson was born, obviously. But when I saw him the day he was born, if I was an atheist, I would have become at least a theist at that point. He didn't get here by chance. Okay, the meaning of life, purpose in life. Life is absurd if there is no God and no life after death. Paul says, if Jesus didn't raise, then the dead will not be raised. And if the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. There's no reason to live. If there's no God and no life after death, then really, when everything's said and done, a million years from now, there'll be no difference between Corrie ten Boom, who risked her life, and some of her family members lost their lives protecting innocent Jews from the Nazis. No difference between her life and Adolf Hitler, who slaughtered innocent Jewish people and innocent non-Jewish people. There's no eternal difference between them if God doesn't exist and there's no life after death. And the atheist might say, even though the atheist is usually denying the good and evil, they say, well, you influence people for good, and so even after you're dead, just think about the impact that you have and stuff like. Now, I think about these atheists that devote their lives to atheism and to standing up for what they think is right. Do they think like we like? Gee, I wonder what people are going to say at my funeral. And I'm sure there's a lot of atheists, leading atheists, that are thinking, Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. People are going to say, what a great man he was. What this was. Hey, does it even matter? You don't even exist anymore. 50 years later, those people won't even exist anymore. A million years from now, your whole universe is going to, well, we don't know how long it'll take, but eventually the whole universe is going to blow up. So if atheism is true, why put a Darwin bumper sticker on your car? If atheism is true, why commit your life to passionately trying to refute God and destroy people's life? If atheism is true, why even get out of bed in the morning? In fact, I said that at a major atheist conference at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, during a debate. And when I said that all those, most of the world's leading atheist philosophers and scientists and historians were there, and I said, why do you people? I said, I don't even know why you people get up. The oldest argument. I don't even know why you people get up in the morning. And all of a sudden, I felt like, oh Lord, I'm being disrespectful to these people. I need to shut up. I thought I was going to be heckled, and I only got 2 responses from the crowd. People either sitting there with their mouths open, looking at me like this, or they were looking down the floor and ticked off, but it's like, I can't, there's nothing I can say. It's true. Why do they get up in the morning? If there's no God, there's no meaning to life. Other common aspects of human experience, a reason to be optimistic about the future and have hope. Bertrand Russell says that basically the universe is nothing but the accidental collocations of atoms. All the things, the great things that we've done, the things that we built, it's going to someday die in the debris of a universe that has died. And then he tells his disciples, now build your lives on this firm foundation of unyielding despair. Why? Why? It doesn't mean anything. Guarantee that evil will be defeated. Atheists love using evil to argue against the existence of God. But number one, if atheism is true, there is no such thing as evil. Whatever is. They're borrowing capital from the Christian worldview. So just the fact that when a baby dies, like I said, that's a product of evil, that's not the way things ought to be. Something went wrong, and it went wrong back in the garden. The atheists can't say that. So they can't even identify evil within their worldview. They have to use a Christian definition of evil. The problem of evil is not just an intellectual, philosophical problem. It's an existential problem. It's a problem of human experience and human existence. Real problems necessitate real solutions. And I know no real solution to the problem of evil except the incarnation, death, resurrection, and return of the Lord Jesus Christ. Everybody lives like they have hope. Look, Blaise Pascal is right. Man's worst enemy is death. And there's absolutely no evidence that death has been conquered unless the tomb was empty and he appeared to his disciples. So a guarantee that he will be defeated. Atheists act like, wow, problem of evil and human suffering, you didn't know about that. Dude, it's the pastors and the priests that go to the hospitals to visit sick people, not the atheists. You think we never go, wow, that's right, I didn't realize evil and human suffering exists. Look, if it wasn't for Genesis chapter 3 and the fall of mankind, there would be no Bible. You could call the Bible God's solution to the problem of evil. And you could sum up the Bible and God's solution to the problem of evil in one word. And that's Jesus. And people might say, oh, you're a fool, you believe in Jesus and all this other stuff. It's like, dude, I got hope. I got a guarantee evil that will be defeated. You're just lying to yourself. Okay? Feelings of guilt. I used to think feelings of guilt, that's not a real strong argument for God, until I started reading Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was like, okay, I'm a brilliant atheist. I know that God doesn't exist. Okay. But why do so many people? It's universal that human beings feel guilt. But there's no God. There's no such thing as right and wrong. Why do we experience guilt? And so he spent the bulk of his career trying to explain away guilt. Now, his explanation was not real convincing. I think Freud assumed he was normal, and I think that's where he went wrong, because he believed the first tribe of humans was a man, his numerous wives, and their children, and the boys wanted to have sex with their mothers. Now, I don't know about you, I was never attracted to my mother. I love my mother, but I've never. But Freud acts like we really. He sees sex everywhere. You know, when a mother is feeding milk to the baby, that's because the baby's in love with the mother. It's like, what are you talking about, dude? And by the way, he tried to figure out if there's no God exists, why does 95% of the world disagree with us? You know what his answer was? The rest of the world's either neurotic or psychotic. You know, whatever the case, feelings of guilt. Guilt is knowledge of sin. Even if you sin when no one else is looking, you feel guilty. And I would argue that persons are more important than things. So persons are more important than laws. The reason why God gives us laws is to protect persons. So if you violate a law when no one else is looking, since persons are more important than laws, if you feel guilty, it's because that by breaking that law, you have offended at least one person. I'd argue you've offended three persons: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay. By the way, how does Freud explain guilt? So then these boys wanted to have sex with their mothers, so they banded together and they killed their father. Then they felt guilty about it, so they chopped up his body to have a ritualistic meal. And then they were afraid of nature, and nature really terrified them, so they personified nature, and they they felt so guilty about killing their father, so they called the nature God the Father, and they tried to offer sacrifice. It's like, what in the world are you talking about, okay? But let me see. He's trying to explain where guilt came from, and that we really shouldn't feel guilty. Why in the world did they feel guilty after killing their dad? You know, I'm talking about as if it really happened. This didn't happen, by the way. Only in Freud's warped mind. But he still hasn't explained why they would have felt guilty unless it really was wrong. So actually, the feelings of guilt, God wrote His moral laws on our hearts, and when we violate those moral laws, we feel guilty. You know, we think, boy, God is so hidden. When you mess up and you feel guilty, it's because deep down inside you know you're standing before the throne of God and you messed up. And then fear of death. People don't normally call for their favorite atheist philosopher when they're on their deathbeds. Instead, they call for a priest or a preacher. Okay, there's something about it. It's not like, you know, they're already dying, so it's not dying that's really got them terrified. It's what comes after death. And so I think when we look at all these common aspects of human experience, it shows us theism is more reasonable than atheism. Two final aspects: human rights, respect for human life. Even atheists protest. They stand up for human rights. I don't always agree with which side they come down on certain issues. But basically, in a world without God, there are no human rights. If we're mere molecules in motion, there are no human rights. And then free will and human responsibility. I talked about this already with Dan Barker. Free will and human responsibility make absolutely no sense if man is mere molecules in motion. If only matter exists, okay, then, if only matter exists, then all our actions and our choices are biologically determined. By the way, we're starting to get empirical evidence that that's false. Scientists have been able to prod the human brain and get people to raise their right hand. Okay, Habermas and Gary Habermas, J.P. Moreland talk about this in Immortality, the Other Side of Life, or the Other Side of Death. I don't remember the title of the book, but they got people, they prod the human brain and they get people to raise their right hand. And then they ask, well, what happened? They thought that people were going to say, well, I decided to raise my right hand, so I raised my right hand. Because that would be the explanation if it's all biologically determined. But they don't. They say, you raised my right hand. I didn't make that decision. People don't like their right hand being raised involuntarily against their will. So a lot of the people grabbed the right arm with their left arm and pulled it back down. And the scientists got real confused. They're prodding the human brain, and they realized wherever the decisions are made, it's not made in the body. So that's evidence of an immaterial soul where we make our choices, and then that begins to act upon the body. But basically, if we have no soul, if you have a soul, it sure sounds like you got to be open to the existence of God. But if we have no souls, then we got to open up the prison doors and set all the prisoners free, because you cannot hold people responsible. You say, well, this guy committed murder. Well, he's no more responsible to commit murder than a guy who caught the flu. It's biologically determined. Unless there's a human soul, and unless there's a God that we're accountable to. So, yeah, so just the fact that atheists want to see criminals behind bars shows that theism is more reasonable than atheism. So, conclusion of the cumulative case: mere molecules in motion, combined with time and chance, cannot explain any of these factors. Now, the atheist has a choice here on each of these factors. They can make a different choice on one than they make on another, but they have a choice to make. They must either deny the reality of these aspects of human experience, so they say, there are no moral absolutes. You know, and then they're going to say, so you're morally wrong if you say that there are, you know, whatever. But they're either going to deny the reality of these aspects of human experience, which I think is really weird, because these aspects of human experience are much more obvious than the supposed truth of atheism. So they're either going to deny them, or they're going to say they're just there. When Bertrand Russell debated Frederick Copleston, the Jesuit priest, on the existence of God, Copleston asked him, well, what should we say about the origin of the universe? And Bertrand Russell said, it's just there, and that is all. That's not a very good explanation. A worldview is an explanation of reality. If your worldview keeps saying it's at the beginning of the universe, it's just there. Eddie Tabash, Jeffrey J. Lauder, two other atheists that I debated, they believe moral laws are just there. Absolute truths, the laws of logic, are just there. You keep saying that these things are just there, then atheism becomes a non-explanation. It becomes such a dumbed-down worldview that it's a world, you say, well, I believe in atheism, and well, how's atheism explain this? It's just there. How's atheism explain that? It's just there. It's just there. It's like, dude, when does your explanation become a non-explanation? And so either option is not real good for them. That's it, right? Yeah, that's it. All right. We only have, what, 20 minutes left for questions? Thank you very much. Okay, okay, so if we have any questions. There's one, yes.
I heard dealing with some atheists online talking about morality has been evolved. Where would you go with that argument? They still believe that morality comes from natural causes. You know, what's it called? Not naturalist, but naturalism.
Naturalism?
Yes.
Yeah. Some try to take evolution itself and make that the source of our moral experience. So the first thing we have to note is, well, this is not really morality that we're talking about. These are just basically defense mechanisms that will help us with survival.
Right.
Okay? So number one, it's not really morality at all. Number two, sometimes we do things that even atheists find noble, and it goes against our survival, like, laying down your life, risking your life for another person. So there's a lot of different things that could be said on it, but basically, I'm not sure they should go down that route. I'm not sure I encourage them to go down that route. Charles Darwin tried. Everybody reads his Origin of Species. Nobody wants to talk about his work 15 years later, The Descent of Man. Descent of Man, he tried to start out what later became called social Darwinism. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was a social Darwinist. Adolf Hitler, even though he was a cultist, believed in evolution and was a social Darwinist. Darwin was, because of his growing up in a Christian culture, he was an abolitionist. He was opposed to slavery and the slave trade. But in his Descent of Man, he said things that he admitted really bothered him. But he said that a species would have to be real stupid, this is in The Descent of Man, to allow its weaker members to reproduce. Because you want to further your evolution and stuff like that. And so he talked about the fact that we build asylums for the insane and hospitals for the sick and stuff like that. We're probably going in the wrong direction. Allow nature to weed out the quote-unquote undesirables. And then he did one of the most racist things in recent literature, by the last few hundred years. And he started talking about apes and then different supposed races of humans. There is only one human race. The whole idea there's different races of humans, that's a Darwinian evolutionary idea. But he started talking about aboriginal people and stuff like that, and talking about how evolution demands that the superior races eventually wipe out the inferior races, and then the gaps between the apes and men will be much, much greater. This is just pure racism in its ugliest form. And he keeps pulling back on that himself. But, what do they say? Evolution is red in tooth and claw. It's a bloody. That's why I'm not a theistic evolutionist. God would not use something so violent, so bloody, so horrible to produce mankind. But basically, if you want to go with an atheistic ethic, if you want to go with an evolutionary ethic that somehow derives from evolution, it'd be the Adolf Hitler type. That to protect the pure bloodline of the Aryan race, the master race, you need to exterminate the quote-unquote subhuman races. That's a consistent ethic with evolution. Margaret Sanger agreed. When she founded Planned Parenthood, she wanted to sterilize anybody that didn't fit her definition. By the way, whoever's figures out what the supposed master race is, or the most superior, evolved people are, it's always going to be their own race. Okay? And so she had to tone things down because Hitler was really bad publicity for her views. She praised Hitler early on, before she saw the world sentiment turning on him. Another thing I would say is rather curious that within evolution there would be a mechanism that got there by chance, a defense mechanism that furthered the survival of the species. that to me smells of design. In other words, they're giving evolution and the intelligence to pre-design things so that the species would function in a way that they would desire the survival of their species. But if evolution is true, I don't see why how the survival of the human race or the survival of any type of animals would be any better than the extinction of the human race. If evolution is true, whatever it is. So basically what I'm saying is again, it's a little more sneaky way that they're doing it, but they're borrowing capital from the Christian worldview. But the work that's been done on it has been pretty. The guys who are really consistent with atheism, it's the survival of the fittest, only the strong survive. Things that evolutionists don't like to talk about anymore. But that's what it would be. Okay. Yeah, Phil?
Like what you had to say there, just, segue into a little different thing here. When you say tooth and claw, violence and destruction, a lot of times in Genesis, of course, they want to add the gap theory in there. And then that way they can put all these animals, or they can put, satanic violence within the angel ranks or whatever in there to demonstrate that, there's something else going on. So I actually like that point that you made. And my real question is, unfortunately I walked in after you talked about the Big Bang. So I'm wondering if you could mention, or if you did mention, just the order of the Big Bang and how that conflicts with the Bible, or where you stand on, the Big Bang theory.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Christians say, God spoke it into existence, and that's the Big Bang theory.
Yeah, the scientific evidence I use for the beginning of the universe would be the second law of thermodynamics, energy deterioration. Now, I will also use Big Bang cosmology, but I said, before you came in, it's not something that I hold to, that I believe in, but almost everybody I debate does. So I say, if your Big Bang is correct, the universe had a beginning and therefore needs a cause. And I even use several philosophical arguments for the beginning of the universe as well. So I'm not committed to the Big Bang, but you're exactly right. You, Ross, God bless him, he's a great guy. I met him. I really think he loves the Lord. And my buddies, William Lane Craig, I don't know where Gary Habermas is. He doesn't talk about it much, even when the conversation's going on with other guys. But Norman Geisler's now an old earther. William Lane Craig. Moreland, I think, tilts in the favor of old earth creationism, but admitted to me face to face that he would not be surprised if in the end young earth creationism is vindicated. But basically, among Christian philosophers and Christian theologians, the vast majority are old earthers, not young earthers. But just read Hugh Ross's conversion. He was a young kid, probably about 16, 17 years old. He was a teenager. And he didn't believe in God because he believed that God conflicted with cosmology and astronomy. Okay? And so what he did was he set out to disprove the Genesis chapter 1 account. And as he started studying, as a teenager, no theological training, never took a course in hermeneutics, science of biblical interpretation, and he found that he could reconcile Genesis chapter 1 with Big Bang cosmology. Let me tell you, the order is totally different. Okay? The order of things coming into existence, it just really, you got, what do you have? I have to look there, it'd probably take too long.
The sun's
you got like
till
plant
the
light
day.
before the sun.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what he's saying is that the sun's existing, but we just can't see it, and he's doing a dance in the Hebrew, which he never really was trained in Hebrew. So I don't think that Big Bang cosmology is consistent with Genesis 1. I also think when you read scientists on it, even those who hold the Big Bang cosmology agree that there are a lot of problems with it. Okay? When they're adding, footnote 1753, footnote 3708. That's because they have a problem with the view as it was originally stated. And, the universe does appear to be expanding, but, Russell Humphreys came up with a model of the universe based on young Earth creationism, where he has God really expanding the universe on I believe on the fourth day. He uses white hole cosmology, which some of the world's leading scientists hold to, and so basically you would experience billions of years from the perspective of the far reaches of the universe, but on planet Earth you'd only experience 24-hour days. Now even Russell Humphreys, I met him, spoke at a conference that he spoke at just a few months ago. Great guy, had dinner with him and everything, but even he admits he's not sure he believes his model of the universe is correct. And even he admits that there's problems. But that's the way you're supposed to do theoretical physics. You're supposed to make proposals, but you know that you don't have all the information, and open it up to testing, and you make suggestions. We got guys that are not making suggestions in the scientific community anymore. They're pontificating. We've given the scientific community infallibility, so they are the new popes, and they speak infallibly to the people. And as bad as that is, it's even worse the fact that no two of them agree with each other on anything. And so I can't, go into it right now, lack of time, but also even lack of knowledge. I'd have to go into notes that I wrote years ago, but yeah, there are some real issues there. Now I will say this, when I debate on college campuses, if I'm going to argue for a young Earth, I might as well argue for a flat Earth. And so that's now, I'm not saying that no one should argue on college campuses for a young Earth. If your name is Jonathan Sarfati, okay, and you're one of the most brilliant people on planet Earth, I mean, this guy is a brilliant thinker. He's actually terrified when he gets up to speak to people. Quiet, soft-spoken guy. He only speaks to the multitudes because God's called him to do that. But just a great guy, brilliant guy. But I myself feel led to just argue for God's existence on college campuses. If I move an atheistic evolutionist to theistic evolution, or a theistic evolutionist to old Earth creationism, then fine. That's why Eddie Tabash kept trying to get me in my debate against him. He kept reading quotes where I said that I was a young Earth creationist. And so I kept saying, look, this debate is about, does God exist? Not how old is the universe. So if the universe is old, I win. If the universe is old Earth creationism, I win. If it's theistic evolution, I win. If it's young Earth creationism, I win. If it's Hinduism, I win. This debate is, does God exist? So will you please argue for something that will help your cause? So I'm inviting you back into this debate. Anytime you want to come back, great. But if not, I'm going to stick to what I'm debating tonight. And so basically what I'm saying is, if the atheists will give me the beginning of the universe because they believe in the Big Bang, okay, well then I'll take it and use it against them. But I believe that the scientific evidence for the beginning of the universe is based much more firmly on the second law of thermodynamics, not on Big Bang cosmology. I believe the bulk of the old Earth, young Earth debate ought to be occurring in the church. What I'm saying is the world is so far away from the truth, they can only handle a teaspoon of truth at a time. It's like that Tom Cruise movie, You Can't Handle the Truth.
Absolutely.
When we're witnessing, we just got a lot of people who can't handle the truth. But that's an excellent point, Phil, and keep in mind, I'm not saying let's compromise the truth and try to lead people to Christ. What I'm saying is, let's try to be wise as serpents, as Jesus said, and try to remove as many stumbling blocks as possible, but still give them the true, full gospel message. Now, when a guy gets saved, and he's a new believer, yeah, I expect, I will argue with him about his theistic evolution. And then if he becomes an old Earth creationism, if I have enough time, I'll try to convince him to be a young Earther, but, if William Lane Craig is an old Earth creationist till the day he dies, I think he's still going to get a pretty cushy place in heaven. So, okay, any other questions?
Well, I guess I'll throw one out there. You touched on it, but it's something that Michael Sherman brings up all the time, and I just feel like a lot of people don't really kind of deal with it properly. He deals up with the moral absolutes as just part of being that evolutionary process, that as creatures, we just have these in that kind of moral absolutes that just, that we hold to, and that.
Yeah, Jeffrey J. Lowder, Eddie Tabash, same thing. Yeah.
And so just that. So on one hand, they'll say, hey, you know what, you Christians, you kind of hold to some moral absolutes that, we do too. So we're no sense even arguing about that.
Yeah, and what he's evading the point is that consistent with his worldview? Does his worldview really lead you in that direction? And most atheists would say no. I think moral absolutes are strange furniture in a world without God. I think Friedrich Nietzsche was a much more consistent atheist, that God is dead, morality is dead as well, and truth is dead, and meaning is dead. So I just think it begs the question, because Michael Shermer sounds real brilliant when he says that, but what he's actually saying is moral absolutes are just there. And what about absolute truth, Michael? They're just there. And the list goes on and on. By the way, I'd just like to mention about Shermer, he is a really nice guy. Most of the atheists I've debated are really nice guys. Dan Barker, Peter John, there's some guys who are really irritable, and they don't like it when I try to give them a hug. But even Paul Kurtz, because we're both from North New Jersey, gave me a big hug. But some of these guys are really nice guys, so pray for them. Hitchens and Dawkins, I don't get that impression from them, but I never met them. So, I talked to guys who debated them, and they didn't seem to. A lot of them like Hitchens' sense of humor, but it doesn't sound like he's the greatest guy to be around. Michael Shermer's a really nice guy, but what he's saying is absolute moral laws, they're just there. And it's like, I find that hard to believe if atheistic evolution is true. So I think the burden of proof is on him. And then they just say they're brute facts. Look, here's the way Lauder, Shermer, and Tabash are saying that these moral absolutes are just there, they're brute facts, and the laws of logic are brute facts. And they say, we can do that because you say God is a brute fact. Yeah, but we have lots of reasons for believing that God is the brute fact. That he's just there. Why? Because something has to be infinite, eternal, unchanging, to ground all the finite existence. That is the ultimate explanation. They think you can just make things brute facts. I mean, no, you gotta have some good reasons for saying that, and I don't think they do that, so. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Are they calling evil, how do they determine that? I mean, how do they say evil, but what does that mean? Does that mean bad things?
Yeah.
Does that mean what Hitler did? And then if they say, if the universal moral absolutes are just there, and you put those along what they term as evil, there's the contradiction.
Well, they're the ones that are saying that the moral absolutes are just there. See, what that is, they sound real triumphant, but what that shows is atheists have been losing the debates. Because atheists have been saying there's no such thing as right and wrong. And that's consistent atheism. So what atheists are doing is they're becoming more and more inconsistent, and they're borrowing more and more capital from the Christian worldview. So they're saying, yeah, the Holocaust really was evil. And it's like somebody asked Eddie Tabash when I debated him at Washington State University, at what point did a single-cell animal eventually evolve to where it evolved moral laws? And he said, no, they're just there. So it's more like, it's not like evolving into morality, but it's evolving to the point where you latch on to the moral absolutes that have been waiting there for you for billions of years. And again, to me, that shows evidence of design. that the evolution is like thinking, wow, they're going to need moral absolutes in the future and absolute truth, so I'll have them built into the beginning of the universe so that they'll be there, and then they'll evolve the ability to latch onto those things and utilize those things. You know, it's just like the valves in the neck of a giraffe.
That's right.
The evolutionary response it kind of gives foreknowledge to evolution, which isn't supposed to have any knowledge at all. But it gives foreknowledge to evolve things that it doesn't start evolving things that it doesn't presently need, so that when it needs those things, so that the brain, it isn't going to have a stroke and die when it bends the neck down. It has evolved things that it didn't need, anticipating the day when the giraffe's neck will be long enough to where it will need it. It's like, what in the world are you talking about? Your evolution is sounding more and more like the God of the Bible. It's an intelligent designer that designs things with a purpose, and so I think we just have to call them out. But you're exactly right. We've got to call them out when they're being inconsistent. You know, we cannot. It'd be like if we start out we got 50 eggs in our basket, and they have one or two. I doubt they even have that, because even atheistic evolution has a hard time explaining really the existence of a rock. But let's say they can explain a rock. So let's say they got one or two eggs in their basket. As we're arguing with them and stuff like that, we can't let them take eggs from our basket and put it into their basket like they've been there all the time. You know, these are theistic concepts that Muslims, Christians, and Jews, that's part of our worldviews. You know, now when I debate the Jews and the Muslims, I go to historical evidence to prove that Jesus is who he claimed to be, and he did rise from the dead, and he did die for our sins. But the theistic worldview, the idea of a personal creator God, these are givens. The validity of human reason, absolute truth, absolute morality, those are givens. It really doesn't make any sense that those things would be there at all in an atheistic evolutionary universe.
Except
Okay.
they can feel pain and see bad things happen, so they could just label that evil.
They could call it what they want, but really when it comes down to defining evil, atheists are really hard-pressed to define it, except the ones that say that they're just there. Because what evil is a perversion of that which is good. And so if there's no all-good God, no perfect standard, then how can you have a perversion of the good when there really is no good? I mean, how can you say a line is crooked when there's no concept of a straight line? So I mean, they could say that, but even evolutionists, I don't even know how evolutionists could call pain evil. So much of the quote-unquote good things of evolution came about through millions, if not billions of years, well, millions, well, at least hundreds of millions of years of pain and suffering.
So then to be a consistent evolutionist and hold that worldview, which is, my understanding is survival of the fittest, then there could not even be any such thing as objective morality. You cannot even
Exactly.
use the phrase evil. It would contradict their very worldview.
Yeah, exactly, and consistent. No, there's no such thing as a consistent atheist, but the more consistent atheists like Friedrich Nietzsche, Bertrand Russell, but see, Bertrand Russell is actually, speak louder than words. He protested against what he thought was evil, but he really said that in the end it's just preference. It's just like, you like vanilla ice cream, I like chocolate ice cream. And Mother Teresa likes feeding hungry people, Adolf Hitler likes slaughtering them. But Bertrand Russell couldn't live that way. So even when atheists are being consistent, watch the way they live. They usually, any worldview that is not livable is not a worldview worth holding. Okay, and but now we're seeing more and more inconsistent atheists because they're getting tired of losing debates. Okay, now I'll just close with this. On my cumulative case, by the way, I don't think there's ever been anybody from Michael Martin on that I've used my cumulative case that, I don't know if they don't understand it, or they understand it, so they try to argue around it instead of, but they never, I tell them, all you gotta do to defeat me, take each of these aspects and give some evidence. Okay, the universe had a beginning. Well, that's atheism is obviously more reasonable, more plausible of an explanation than theism. They don't do that. They just say, well, maybe that could prove the existence of many gods or something like that, you know. By the way, do not let, I call it the fallacy of piling on. Tell atheists, my dialogue with you will be theism versus atheism. Not theism versus atheism, pantheism, polytheism, deism, panentheism. Don't allow them to bring all their other worldview buddies with them and say, Michael Martin was doing that to me. Oh, well, that argument could just as easily prove deism. Or that argument could just as easily prove polytheism. It's like, dude, if it proves deism or polytheism, you lose. Why are you bringing in all these worldviews that believe in God? You're not supposed to. Oh no, I don't have a belief. I just lack belief. He wouldn't even tell me what his view on morality was, and he wouldn't even tell me what his view on truth, whether he believed in absolute truth. And so I said, you're like a person who throws rocks at everybody else's house, but then you never give out your address because you know that you live in a glass house. Okay? You know what his response to that was? He said, no, atheism is a brick house. Whatever, dude.
Do you think that many of these questions and answers from that side has been influenced by the Eastern mysticism of that life is an illusion and therefore you can't really give a real answer?
That's a really good question. I don't think I would word it that way, but the way I would word it is this. When you take God out of the picture and you try to build a coherent worldview on atheism, you start entering into the realm of the absurd, and you have to start denying realities that point to God, like the common aspects of human experience. So I think eventually the choice is between, as atheism fails, the choice is between a return to the God of the Bible or movement to the East. A move east and Eastern pantheism. And C.S. Lewis in 1944, I was arguing for it since 1987. C.S. Lewis was arguing for it since 1944 in his work, The Abolition of Man. That science is very much like magic because both try to control nature. And the last thing for science to control in nature is man himself. However, once science takes God out of the picture, then the whole basis for truth gets removed, and then all of a sudden, just all science is instead of discovering nature and then attempting to control it to put a man on the moon or cure a disease, you lose that search for truth, and all science is about is controlling humans. And so then it just becomes a tool in the hands of the man-molders of the New Age, C.S. Lewis's phrase back in 1944, the man-molders of the New Age, and where the few will control the billions. And so science is really going to be just magic. The scientists are going to be the sorcerers. I think we're starting to see this now with the return of the ancient pagan gods. Whenever Richard Dawkins or Hoyle McGramasing talk about panspermia, maybe intelligent life from other planets seeded the earth with life. Maybe our creators are beings from other planets. Well, the ancient Greeks called the visitors from somewhere else, these visitors from somewhere else in the universe, and manifested themselves to mankind and visited the planet. They called them the gods. And the word in Greek for God there is daimonios. Well, the ancient Christians and ancient Jews said what they call the gods are it's not just their imagination. They're having real spiritual experiences, but what they call the gods are actually fallen angels. So our word demons, actually, it's a word that ancient Christians and ancient Jews borrowed from one of the Greek words for the gods. And that's why William Alnor's book, I think 1994, UFOs in the New Age, he showed how the UFO movement is blending with the New Age movement. It's turning into a religion, and that there's about 95% of UFO sightings and all can be explained as hoaxes or naturalistically, but it's the 5%. Even Hugh Ross has written on this extensively, Gary Bates. But basically, there seems to be some real heavy demonic deception and demons physically manifesting themselves to lead man astray. And when we try to view this in a non-spiritual, non-religious manner, we're allowing ourselves to be deceived. In reality, it could be a return of the ancient quote-unquote gods. And I think Richard Dawkins and company are going to abandon the atheist ship someday and jump on a neo-pagan New Age bandwagon. But you're exactly right that this, when you're trying to debate for supremacy in the intellectual arena, in the realm of ideas in the Western world, if you're getting battered, if atheism's getting battered too much, and you don't want to return to Christianity, you're probably going to jump into Eastern thought. And so that's why I gave a message in 1987, secular America goes New Age, and I do think that's the direction we're going. I think that's about all the time we have, because we need to take a little break, and then Pastor Keith is going to be speaking, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
All right,
All right,
God bless
thank
you.
you.